I made a working helicopter using Create Mod and a few add-ons like Valkyrien Skies and Clockwork. And what sets this helicopter apart is that it uses real physics concepts like counter torque, and I also drew upon my experience that I gained while working in the aerospace industry to make the controls and mechanisms as accurate as was practical. So before we have an in-depth look at the helicopter, there's a few concepts that we should understand. The first important thing to understand is that what looks like a big propeller actually is not a propeller, it's a moving wing. So we call airplanes fixed wing aircraft, and helicopters are rotary wing aircraft, and that means that we have to control the angle of the wing on the helicopter rotor just like we would on an airplane. So ideally what I would do is I would set up wings like this on flat bearings on a rotor so I could control them like this, and then just put them on a helicopter bearing that would tilt so that I could control the aircraft, so I could control the direction that it goes in. However, there's one little problem. When I build this, well, it starts turning, but the wings are no longer connected to the flat bearings. So unfortunately, I can't use the copter bearing that was just added to Clockwork. And you might be saying, well, why don't you just use a propeller bearing on top of a copter bearing? That seems to work. Well, yes, but what we have to do if we want to change the angle of the blades is that we have to go on top of it and stop it and then change it like this. So there's no dynamic way to change the angles of the blades. And there's also one big difference is that these propellers do not produce a counter torque. So counter torque is part of how we steer. It's something that has to be fought against in helicopters, but it's also a feature, as we'll see in just a bit. So I can't use this because one, there's no counter torque, and two, I can't angle the blades. If I could angle the blades, it wouldn't be so bad if there was no counter torque. I could also figure out a way to steer, but it wouldn't be a realistic helicopter. So just to show you how the copter bearing works is that if you give it a redstone signal, well, it's going to tilt to that side, and that's what one of our mechanisms is going to do. So you see how this is tilted forward? Well, that's because we need to tilt the blade over like this, or rather the moving wing over like this. And what that does is it creates lift in a certain direction. That allows us to move in a direction, but also stay floating in the sky. So I was talking about counter thrust, right? So what we have to do is we have to counter the force that the moving wings put on the body of the aircraft. So because the top is spinning in a direction, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction, and that's going to be that the base is going to turn in the opposite direction. So what we need to do is we need to have another blade. So right here I have a physics bearing and a wing, and this isn't exactly the setup I have. What I've done is I've set up this right here, which is just a regular old propeller, but it works the same, or at least the concept is the same. So this will still illustrate what's going on. So we need to produce a thrust with a propeller, and let's say that thrust is 16 RPM. Well, how do we steer then? Well, what we need to do is we need to first have a way to make the propeller spin faster to counter the counter torque enough that it turns in the opposite direction. And we also need to stop it. So if we stop countering the counter torque, what's going to happen is that we're going to let the counter torque actually steer the helicopter. And what that does is it uses the counter torque as a feature instead of as a bug. So we actually take advantage of this physical concept to steer our aircraft. So if we want to understand how to build and control a helicopter, there's three important concepts that we need to know. The first is that we need to be able to control the angle of the wings on the rotor. So you might think of these as propeller blades, but really it's the angle of a moving wing. So I set this up on my controller that when I press space bar or shift, the angle will move. So I have a 1 RPM motor going in here, and this is called the collective control because it collectively changes the pitch of all the blades on the rotor. The second control that we need to be aware of is the cyclic, and that allows us to tilt the rotor in any possible direction. So I can turn this around, and what this will do is it will control the direction that it will go in. It won't control the rotation, but it will control in which direction the aircraft will go. So if it's tilted this way, well, it's gonna go kind of to the right and also probably kind of forward a little bit, at least if I put it like this. So if you want to fly forward in a helicopter, what you need to do is turn this so that it's about flat, otherwise it's going to turn a bit. I'm going to turn it just a bit more. I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to tilt it forward. So with it tilted like this, well, this will give you enough forward thrust that you can fly around. And on this one, I've tilted it quite a bit. I've gone up to maybe 45 degrees. I haven't gone too much further than that, but I might be able to. So I'm going to put this back, and we're going to look at the third important concept to understand before we start flying around in this thing. So I'm now going to flick this lever, and we're going to give rotation to the rotor and to this propeller in the back. And you'll notice that, well, this is spinning, but it's not flying. And that's because until you give an angle to these blades, it won't actually generate any lift to bring the aircraft up into the air. So we can safely start the engine without the helicopter flying away. So back to this third concept, and that's the concept of counter torque. So right now we have this blade spinning, and I'm not sure if we'll see this while it's on the ground, but if I press right on here, the blade will stop spinning, and we can see that the aircraft is ever so slightly starting to rotate in the other direction. And that's because there's friction with the ground, but we'll see when it's in the air, it's gonna turn a lot faster. It won't be super fast, but it'll turn quickly enough from the counter torque that we can use that to steer the helicopter. And now if I press the other direction, well, this blade will spin and it'll turn faster, and well, as we can see, it's rotating just a little bit. And like I said, in the air we'll see this be a lot more pronounced, but now that it's on the ground, there's friction, so it's not actually rotating as fast. So there's another thing right here. I do have a gyroscope here, and that's to keep it stable. So that's so that it doesn't rotate from side to side. We want it to rotate, we want to have it yaw, but we don't want to have it roll at all. So we'll take this thing for a spin in just a bit, but first let's have a look at how I set everything up. So I use some physics bearings here. So this is actually 3 or 4 separate ships. So the base is one ship, then I have 3 bearings up here, so it's a ship on a ship on a ship on a ship. So the rotor is, I guess, 3 degrees removed from the base of the ship, so that makes this kind of hard to, if I want to copy paste it, I have to like copy the base, and really I only have a schematic for the base. The rest of it is all separate. So I will be making this available as a world download on my Patreon, so you can go ahead and download it there to either just have a look or fly it around. And it really is a lot of fun to fly around, especially with distant horizons. You have such a nice view. So I have these physics bearings set up here, and I use the universal joints from the new version of Clockwork to transmit the rotation. So this is creative. I could have just plopped some creative motors on here. I did set a creative motor right here because it's spinning, but I probably could have put a universal joint as well. So this should be survival friendly. I haven't actually tried with survival, but you can just probably have one power source. You might want to extend this a little bit back and put an engine of your choice, and you're going to want to slow this down to 1 RPM for the control surfaces, because you don't want these blades to tilt too fast, and you don't want these bearings to rotate too fast either, because you want very fine-tuned control. So this is turning, I believe, at 64 RPM. Actually, we can go have a look. I put these blocks right here for balance. So yeah, that's 64 RPM. So another thing about balance. So I'm going to do F3 and B, and we're going to see this yellow cube, which is the center of gravity. And we want that as close to the center of the shaft as possible, because that's where our thrust is coming from. And we want that thrust to act on the middle of the ship and not close to the back or close to the front or off to the side, because then it's going to tilt it a little bit. It's not going to tilt it that much because we have a gyroscope, but it's not going to be an effective use of our resources, and it's going to be harder to control, and it won't be optimal. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off F3 and B, and we're going to have a look here too. So this is turning at the same speed as this shaft here, and that's because this is the counter torque propeller, and the torque is proportional to the rotation. So we have it set up in a way where this right now will cancel out the torque as best as we can. What I've done is I've adjusted the angle of the blades on here. So if we go ahead and disassemble this for just a sec, you can go have a look at the angle on the blades here. So I set this to 35. And it's good enough. So I have 4 blades, 35, and it's at the same RPM as the main rotor shaft. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back on, and we use, right here, this is a redstone resistor, and I have an encased chain drive here that I use to either stop the rotation or double the speed, and that's how we steer. So I think that's pretty much it. All right, so let's take this for a spin. So I'm gonna press spacebar, and we're gonna give it a bit of collective and go up. And you'll see that we're gonna spin a bit more to the right than we should be. And that's because when you're giving it more collective, when you're giving it angle to the blades up there, you're producing more counter torque. So the counter torque is stronger when the blades are active. So if I let go, we're just gonna naturally start turning a bit slightly to the left, or even just a little bit straight. So now we're going pretty much straight, and you can see the counter torque rotor is doing a pretty good job. Now we're turning a bit to the right, but that's okay. We can just adjust ourselves, and this is gonna require a little bit of adjustment, even though it's pretty closely tuned. You might wanna change this a little bit, maybe slightly change the angle of the blades on the blade control, but you can see it's pretty easy to control, and I can tilt this forward, and we're gonna go a little bit faster. So we're gonna sacrifice a little bit of upwards thrust to have more forwards thrust, but it's enough to keep us in the air. So I do have my thumb on spacebar to continue to give this the maximum collective. So in an actual helicopter, this is just kind of a stick that you pull and push forward. The cyclic, which lets you turn the angle of the rotor. That's like a kind of like a joystick. And in a real helicopter, if you want to turn, well, you do that with the anti-torque pedals. And you press down these pedals to control the yaw, just like you would in an airplane. So we have pretty good control, so I can go where I want fairly well. I'm going to go ahead and fly around that mountain, and then I guess we're going to go back to where we were, and I'm going to show you that I can land this with quite a bit of accuracy. So now I'm not giving it any collective, and you can see we're falling down quite slowly. We don't quite drop like a rock, which is good. I'm going to give it more collective now, and we're going to start going back up. But it's nice to be down here and just enjoy the view a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and be in first person mode, and you can see the view, and this is a pretty nice view. I'm going to press F1, and man, look at that. I love this. I love just flying around in aircraft in Valkyrien skies and just look at the terrain. So this is a really nice thing. Not only do we get to build cool ships, we also get to enjoy the beautiful terrain of Minecraft. So actually, I'm going to turn us around because I just remembered something, and that's when I get too close to a lot of my other ships, this one starts to glitch out. So I guess the game can't calculate all the physics for all the Clockwork aircraft. So I have a plane down there, and I have a bunch of physics objects moving around, so that's a problem. You can't get too close to those. So I'm going to fly us back this way, and I'm going to do it in first person, probably until we get close to the landing. So I'm actually going to go around here, and there's a river, and there's these two mountains, and I'm going to fly in the valley between the two of them. So I'm just going to go forward a bit more, and then when I get closer, we're going to turn around. And you can also look up and see the mechanism, which is pretty neat. I'm going to tilt it forward a little bit to get some more forward thrust. And we're going to keep going around here, and I'm going to go fly through this canyon right here. So I'm pulling back a little bit on the cyclic there because I found I wasn't getting enough upwards thrust. So now I'm just going to fly through here. I'm going to go down a little bit because if I just fly above it, that's no fun. I don't want to go through the canyon. So I'm flying through this canyon. There's a bee there, and I'm getting to see the trees. And yeah, so this is quite easy to control, easy enough to control that you can get pretty close to the natural features. So right, I'm going to try to land right where I was before. I'm going to approach the airstrip perpendicularly. I'm not going to approach as you would normally, but I will still be able to land it, which goes to show how much control I will have. So now I'm going to press F5 and go to third person because it's easier to land this way. It's kind of hard to land in first person. So we are going to approach. I'm going to go a bit higher because I don't want to fall too much. Not yet. Okay, so now we're over it, and I'm going to turn, and we're just going to let ourselves fall. Alternatively, I could press shift, and that would change the blade rotors in the opposite direction, and that would make us go down. So there you go. This is a realistic helicopter, or at least as realistic as I think we can easily get to using Clockwork. So I tried to use as many real life concepts, both in terms of how real life helicopters are controlled and in terms of physics as a real helicopter would use. So I don't know if this is the first helicopter to work this way in Minecraft or with Clockwork. This is the first one I've seen. So if you've seen something similar like this, let me know. And this world will be available as a world download on my Patreon. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you could, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and activate notifications. Thank you for watching.